"You are out of order," she screamed, her face twisted with rage as she pointed a trembling finger at the tall black man standing calmly in the gallery. "Security, remove this man from my courtroom immediately." The entire courtroom froze. Ashton Reid didn't move. He stood there in his perfectly pressed navy suit, hands clasped in front of him, his expression completely neutral. His dark eyes never left the judge's face. "Your Honor," he said quietly, his voice steady as stone, "I haven't said a word." "I don't care." Sabrina Clarke's voice cracked with fury. Her blonde hair, pulled back in a tight bun, seemed to vibrate with her anger. "You're disrupting my courtroom with your presence. Bailiff, take him into custody for contempt." Gasps rippled through the wooden benches. A young mother clutched her son's hand. An elderly man in the back row whispered, "What's happening?" A lawyer in a gray suit stood up, confused, then quickly sat back down. Two bailiffs moved toward Ashton, their faces uncertain, their hands hovering near their belts. Ashton still didn't move. "Ma'am," one bailiff said carefully, "he hasn't actually—" Did I stutter? Judge Clarke's face was turning red now. I said, "Take him. Now. 30 days for contempt. 30 days. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Someone in the back pulled out their phone. Another person stood up to leave, shaking their head. Ashton Reid took one slow breath. Then he smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small curve at the corner of his mouth, like he knew something nobody else did. "Your Honor," he said, his voice carrying across the silent room, "I think you're going to want to reconsider that order." Judge Clarke's eyes went wide with shock. "How dare you?" "Because," Ashton continued, reaching slowly into his jacket pocket, "you really don't know who I am." The bailiff stopped moving. The entire courtroom held its breath. What was he about to pull out? "Before we dive in, tell us where you are watching from in the comment section below." Judge Sabrina Clarke's hand froze on her gavel. Her mouth opened, then closed. For just a moment, one single moment, doubt flickered across her face. But it was too late. The damage was already done. And what nobody in that courtroom knew, not the lawyers, not the defendants, not even the bailiffs, was that Ashton Reid had been planning for this moment for 3 months. Because 6 hours earlier, his day had started very differently. The sun was barely up when Ashton's black sedan rolled into the small town of Millerton, Georgia. Population, 14,000. Located 2 hours south of Atlanta, Millerton was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone. White picket fences lined the streets. The diner on Main Street had been owned by the same family for 40 years. American flags hung from porches. Church bells rang on Sundays. It looked perfect, but Ashton knew better. He'd spent the last 12 weeks reading reports. Complaint after complaint. Pattern after pattern. All pointing to one person, Judge Sabrina Clarke. Over-sentencing black defendants. Dismissing cases brought by people of color. Threatening public defenders who fought too hard. And doing it all with a smile. The files were thick. The evidence was clear. But evidence wasn't enough. Ashton needed to see it himself. He needed to witness her courtroom, observe her behavior, catch her in the act. That's why nobody knew he was coming. Not the governor, not the press, not even his own staff. Ashton Reid, the newly appointed Attorney General of Georgia, had decided to go undercover. He parked his car 3 blocks from the courthouse and walked. No briefcase, no badge, just a man in a suit blending into the morning crowd. The Millerton Courthouse was an old brick building with tall white columns. It looked like something out of a history book. Proud, official, untouchable. Ashton climbed the steps slowly, watching. A group of lawyers chatted near the entrance. A woman in a wheelchair struggled with the heavy door until a teenager ran over to help. A police officer nodded at Ashton as he passed, but his eyes lingered a little too long. Ashton noticed. He always noticed. Inside, the courthouse smelled like old wood and floor polish. The floors were marble. The walls were covered with portraits of judges from decades past. All white, all men, all staring down with serious expressions. Ashton found the directory. Courtroom 7B. Judge Sabrina Clarke presiding. He took the stairs instead of the elevator. Slowly, listening, voices echoed from above. "She's in a mood today," someone said. "When isn't she?" Another voice replied, followed by nervous laughter. Ashton reached the second floor and followed the signs. The hallway was crowded with people waiting for their cases to be called. Some sat on benches, bouncing their knees nervously. Others paced. A young black man in his 20s leaned against the wall, staring at the floor, his public defender whispering urgently beside him. Ashton walked past them and slipped into courtroom 7B. The room was smaller than he expected, about 50 seats, dark wood everywhere. An American flag and a Georgia state flag stood on either side of the judge's bench. And there she was, Judge Sabrina Clarke. She sat high above everyone else, her black robe making her look larger than life. She was in her late 40s, with sharp features and cold blue eyes. She held her gavel like a weapon. Ashton took a seat in the back row. He pulled out a small notebook and a pen. To anyone watching, he looked like a legal observer, a law student, maybe, or a journalist. Nobody paid him any attention. The case being heard was simple: a traffic violation. A young black woman named Keisha stood at the defendant's table, her hands shaking. "Your Honor," her lawyer said, "my client was pulled over for a broken taillight. She fixed it the next day. We're asking for a dismissal." Judge Clarke didn't even look at the paperwork. "Denied. Fine is $800. Next case." $800. The lawyer's voice rose in disbelief. "Your Honor, that's—" "Are you questioning my judgment, counselor?" The lawyer went silent. Keisha's shoulders slumped. $800. Ashton knew what that meant for someone working 2 jobs just to pay rent. He wrote in his notebook, pattern confirmed. Excessive fines. No review of evidence. The next case was called a Latino man. Parking ticket. Should have been $50. Judge Clarke made it $300. Then came an older black man accused of loitering. He'd been sitting on a bench outside a store, waiting for his wife. "Guilty," Judge Clarke said before he even finished explaining. 10 days in county jail. 10 days. The man's voice cracked. "I didn't do nothing." "That's anything, not nothing," Judge Clarke corrected him coldly. "And you'll learn proper English in jail." "Bailiff." Ashton's jaw tightened. He kept writing. But inside, anger was building. Case after case. The pattern was undeniable. If you were black or brown, your fine was higher. Your sentence was longer. Your voice didn't matter. And Judge Sabrina Clarke did it all without blinking. Then the moment came. A young black man, maybe 19, was brought in wearing handcuffs. His name was DeAndre Miller. His public defender, a tired-looking woman in her 30s, stood beside him. "Your Honor," the defender began, "my client was arrested for shoplifting a sandwich from a gas station. He was hungry. He has no prior record." "A sandwich?" Asking for her, Judge Clarke interrupted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "How noble, a thief with an appetite." "Your Honor, he's homeless." "I don't care if he's the Pope. Theft is theft. 60 days in county jail." The courtroom went silent. 60 days? The public defender's voice shook. "For a $3 sandwich? You want to make it 90? The defender closed her mouth. DeAndre's eyes filled with tears. "Please," he whispered. "I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Please." Judge Clarke smiled. It was thin, cold, cruel. "You should have thought of that before you broke the law. Bailiff, remove him." That's when Ashton stood up. He didn't plan to. His training told him to stay quiet, to observe, to gather evidence and move carefully. But watching that young man, scared, hungry, helpless, be dragged away for 60 days over sandwich, Ashton couldn't stay silent. He stood, and Judge Sabrina Clarke's eyes locked onto him like a predator spotting prey. "Excuse me," she said sharply. "Who are you?" Ashton met her gaze. A concerned citizen. Her eyes narrowed. "Sit down." "Your Honor, with respect." I said, But Ashton didn't sit. And that's when she lost it. Bang. The gavel came down. You are out of order." And the courtroom exploded into chaos. What happens next will leave you speechless. But here's the thing. If you believe an old judge should abuse their power like this, hit that subscribe button right now. Only someone who sided with bullies wouldn't subscribe. The two bailiffs moved toward Ashton like they were approaching a wild animal. "Sir," the older one said, his voice low and careful, "you need to comply with the judge's order." Ashton looked at him, then at the younger bailiff, whose hand was now resting on his handcuffs, then back at Judge Sabrina Clarke, who sat above them all like a queen on her throne, her face flushed with righteous anger. The courtroom was dead silent, except for the sound of someone's phone camera clicking. "Your Honor," Ashton said, his voice calm and steady, "I'm going to reach into my jacket pocket now. I'm going to do it slowly. And I'm going to show you something that I think will change your mind about jailing me." Judge Clarke's knuckles went white, gripping her gavel. "I don't care if you have a note from the president himself. You disrupted my courtroom, and you will face consequences." "I understand," Ashton said. His hand moved to his inside jacket pocket. Slowly, deliberately, every eye in the room followed his movement. The bailiffs tensed. Ashton's fingers closed around a leather wallet. He pulled it out and flipped it open. The badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Gold. Official. Unmistakable. "My name is Ashton Reid," he said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom. "I'm the Attorney General of the state of Georgia. And Judge Clarke, you are currently the subject of a state investigation into judicial misconduct, civil rights violations, and abuse of power." The courtroom exploded. Gasps. Shouts. Chairs scraping. Someone dropped their phone, and it clattered on the marble floor. Judge Sabrina Clarke's face went from red to white in an instant. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The gavel slipped from her fingers and hit the bench with a dull thud. The older bailiff's eyes went wide. He stepped back from Ashton like he'd just been told he was standing next to a bomb. "That's—" Judge Clarke finally found her voice, but it came out as a whisper. "That's not possible. The Attorney General is—" "Standing right in front of you," Ashton finished. "I took office 6 weeks ago. The governor appointed me personally. And for the last 3 months, my office has been receiving complaints about this courtroom. About you." He took a step forward. The bailiffs didn't stop him. "Excessive sentencing. Racial bias. Denial of due process. Intimidation of defense attorneys. The list goes on, Your Honor. And today, I watched you sentence a hungry teenager to 60 days in jail for stealing a $3 sandwich." Judge Clarke's hands were shaking now. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. I was just—" "The law requires—" "The law requires justice." Ashton cut her off. "Not cruelty. Not prejudice. Justice." A woman in the gallery started clapping. Then another. Then the whole courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Clarke looked around wildly, like a cornered animal searching for an escape route. Ashton raised his hand, and the applause died down. "Bailiff," he said to the older officer, "please release DeAndre Miller from custody immediately. All charges are dismissed." "You can't," Judge Clarke started. "I can," Ashton said firmly. "And I am. Furthermore, I'm ordering an immediate review of every case you presided over in the last 5 years. Every sentence. Every fine. Every ruling." Judge Clarke grabbed the edge of her bench to steady herself. This is an ambush. A political hit job. I have rights." "Yes, you do," Ashton agreed. "And so does every person who's walked through that door. Every defendant who stood where DeAndre is standing. Every person who thought they were getting justice and got discrimination instead." He closed his badge wallet and slipped it back into his pocket. "Court is adjourned," he said, "permanently. As of right now, you are suspended from judicial duties pending a full investigation. You'll be notified of the hearing date." Judge Sabrina Clarke's face crumpled. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. Then anger flashed in her eyes again. "You self-righteous," she hissed. "You think you're some kind of hero? You think you can just walk in here and destroy my career?" Ashton looked at her for a long moment. "No, Your Honor," he said quietly. You destroyed your own career. I'm just making sure you can't destroy anyone else's life." He turned and walked toward the exit. The courtroom erupted again, this time in chaos. Lawyers were shouting questions. Court staff were on their phones. Someone was crying tears of relief. Ashton pushed through the doors and stepped into the hallway. And that's when the real storm began. If you think Ashton did the right thing, drop a comment saying justice right now. Only someone who supports corrupt judges would stay silent. Within 20 minutes, the courthouse was swarming. News vans pulled up outside, their satellite dishes extending toward the sky like mechanical flowers. Reporters rushed through the doors, cameras rolling, microphones ready. Attorney General Reid, can you comment on? Mr. Reid, is it true that Judge Clarke tried to have you arrested? Sir, how long has this investigation been going on? Ashton stood on the courthouse steps. His press secretary, a sharp woman named Diane Foster, who'd driven from Atlanta the moment she got his emergency text, at his side. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ashton said, his voice cutting through the noise, 3 months ago, my office began receiving complaint about irregularities in the Millerton courthouse. After reviewing the evidence, I made a decision to observe Judge Clarke's courtroom personally and without announcement. Camera flashes went off like lightning. What I witnessed today confirmed our worst fears. Systematic bias. Excessive sentencing that disproportionately affected people of color. A complete disregard for the principles of fairness and equal justice under law. A reporter shouted, "Did she really try to jail you?" Ashton's expression didn't change. Judge Clarke ordered me held in contempt and sentenced me to 30 days in county jail before I identified myself. Yes. The reporters erupted in another wave of questions. Diane stepped forward. The Attorney General will release a full statement later this afternoon. Thank you. She guided Ashton back inside, away from the cameras. That was a circus, she muttered. That was necessary, Ashton corrected. The people of this town need to know what's been happening in that courtroom. They walked down the hallway toward the administrative offices. Ashton needed to speak with the chief judge to set the formal suspension process in motion to ensure everything was done by the book. But as they turned a corner, they ran into someone unexpected, a black woman in her 60s, wearing a church dress and carrying a worn purse. Her eyes were red from crying. She looked at Ashton, and her hand flew to her mouth. "You," she whispered. "You're the one who stopped her." Ashton paused. "Ma'am." "My grandson," the woman said, her voice breaking. "DeAndre, the boy with the sandwich. That was my grandson." Ashton's professional mask softened. "Is he all right?" "They just let him go," she said, tears streaming down her face now. "They let him go. He's outside. He's free." She grabbed Ashton's hand in both of hers. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you. That judge, she was going to take my baby away for 60 days. 60 days. For being hungry." Ashton squeezed her hands gently. "He doesn't deserve to be punished for that. Nobody does." "God bless you," the woman whispered. "God bless you." She hurried away, still crying, but this time from relief. Diane looked at Ashton. "That's why you do this." "That's why we all should do this," Ashton replied. They continued toward the administrative wing. But with every step, Ashton felt the weight settling on his shoulders. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Judge Sabrina Clarke sat in her chambers, staring at the wall. Her robe was still on, but it felt like a costume now. A joke. A lie. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Text messages poured in. Emails flooded her inbox. Some were from colleagues, asking if it was true. Some were from lawyers, angry, demanding answers. Some were from people she didn't even know, calling her every name imaginable. Her hand shook as she reached for her cell phone. She dialed a number she hadn't called in months. It rang 3 times before a man's voice answered. "Sabrina?" "Gerald," she said, her voice hoarse. "I need help. I need a lawyer. Now." There was a pause on the other end. "What happened?" "The new Attorney General," she said bitterly. "He came into my courtroom, undercover, and now he's trying to destroy me." Ashton Reid. Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. Sabrina, Gerald said slowly, if Reid is personally investigating you, you're not just in trouble. You're in serious trouble. He doesn't go after small fish. So help me, she snapped. You're supposed to be the best defense attorney in the state. I am, Gerald said, which is why I'm telling you the truth. If Reid has evidence, real evidence, there's not much I can do except negotiate a deal. A deal? Sabrina's voice rose to a screech. I'm not making a deal. I didn't do anything wrong. Sabrina, those people broke the law. I was doing my job. Gerald sighed. I'll come down tomorrow. We'll talk, but you need to be realistic about this. He hung up. Sabrina threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. She sat there, breathing hard, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. She'd been careful. She'd been smart. She never said anything explicitly racist. Never used slurs. Never left evidence. How could they prove bias? But deep down, she knew the truth. They didn't need her to say the words. The numbers spoke for themselves. Outside the courthouse, DeAndre Miller stood in the sunlight, his grandmother's arms wrapped around him. He was crying. I thought I was going to be locked up for 2 months, Grandma, he sobbed. 2 months for a sandwich. Sure, baby, she whispered, rocking him. It's over now. It's over. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was really true, because people like Judge Clarke didn't just go away quietly. And people like Ashton Reid, they made enemies, powerful enemies. Back inside, Ashton sat in a borrowed office, reviewing documents with Diane. We need to be ready, he said. Clarke isn't going down without a fight. She'll hire expensive lawyers. She'll claim she's being targeted. She'll try to turn this into a political circus. Let her try, Diane said. The evidence is solid. Evidence isn't enough, Ashton replied. We need to be flawless. Every I dotted, every T crossed. Because the moment we make a mistake, she'll use it to discredit the entire investigation. Diane nodded. What's our next move? Ashton looked out the window at the crowd of reporters still gathered outside. We keep digging, he said. Clarke's been on the bench for 12 years. I guarantee you this isn't the only courtroom where this has happened. We find every case, every victim, every pattern. That could take months. Then it takes months, Ashton said firmly. Justice doesn't have a deadline. But even as he said it, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a warning. Be careful. People who threaten the powerful don't usually win quietly. They either win big or they lose everything. That night, Ashton checked into a small hotel on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just a clean room with a bed and a desk. He ordered takeout, a burger and fries from a local diner, and spread his files across the bed, case after case, name after name, each one representing a person whose life had been changed, damaged by one judge's bias. His phone buzzed. A text from the governor. Saw the news. Bold move. Call me tomorrow. Then another text, this one from his father. Proud of you, son, but be safe. People like her have friends in high places. Ashton set his phone down and rubbed his eyes. He was tired, exhausted actually, but he couldn't stop now. Not when he just pulled back the curtain. Not when there was so much more to expose. He picked up the next file, and he kept reading. The story broke nationally by morning. Attorney General goes undercover, exposes racist judge. Georgia judge suspended after attempting to jail state's top law enforcement official. Caught on camera the moment a judge's career ended. Ashton sat in his hotel room at 6 a.m., watching the news coverage on his laptop. Every major network had picked it up. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. Even the local stations were running special segments. Someone had recorded the courtroom confrontation on their phone. The video was grainy and shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. Judge Clarke's voice sharp and furious. Ashton's calm response. The moment he revealed his badge. The video had 17 million views. His phone rang. It was Marcus Thompson, his chief of staff back in Atlanta. Boss, Marcus said without preamble. Your office is being flooded. We've had 462 calls since yesterday. People reporting judges. Lawyers wanting to file complaints. Citizens asking if we're investigating their local courts too. Ashton closed his laptop. What's the breakdown? About 60% are legitimate-sounding complaints that need follow-up. 20% are people just wanting to talk about their own cases. The rest are reporters, political operatives, or people congratulating you. And the negative calls, Marcus paused. About 30 so far. Mostly people calling you a race baiter or saying you're attacking judges for... One guy said you're trying to destroy the justice system. Forward the legitimate complaints to the Civil Rights Division. Ashton said, ignore the political noise. Already done. But boss, there's something else you should know. Ashton heard the hesitation in Marcus's voice. What? Judge Clarke hired Gerald Whitmore. Ashton went still. Gerald Whitmore was a legend in Georgia legal circles. Expensive, ruthless, brilliant. If you were wealthy and guilty, Gerald was the man you called when... Last night, he's already filed a motion claiming prosecutorial misconduct and violation of Clarke's civil rights. Says you orchestrated a public humiliation and denied her due process. Ashton almost laughed. She tried to jail me for standing in her courtroom. I know, but Whitmore's spinning it differently. He's saying you provoked her intentionally, that you went in there specifically to make her look bad so you could justify your investigation. That's ridiculous. Maybe, but it'll play well with certain audiences. Fox is already running segments asking if you exceeded your authority. Ashton rubbed his temples. He'd expected pushback, but not this fast. Set up a press conference for this afternoon, he said. I want to address this head-on before the narrative gets away from us. You sure that's wise? Whitmore will twist whatever you say. Let him try. The truth is on our side. After he hung up, Ashton sat in silence for a moment. Then he got dressed, packed his files, and headed back to the courthouse. There was still work to do. The Millerton courthouse was different this morning. Where yesterday it had been chaotic, today it felt tense, nervous, like everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ashton walked through the main entrance and was immediately recognized. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. A court clerk whispered something to her colleague. He made his way to the second floor, where the chief judge's office was located. Chief Judge Harold Brennan was 72 years old, with white hair and tired eyes. He'd been on the bench for 35 years. His office was cluttered with law books and framed photographs of his grandchildren. He stood when Ashton entered. Attorney General, he said formally, I received your request for a meeting. Thank you for seeing me, Judge Brennan. They shook hands. Brennan gestured to a chair. I won't waste your time, Ashton said as he sat. I need access to Judge Clarke's case files for the past 5 years. Sentencing records, case dispositions, everything. Brennan folded his hands on his desk. That's a significant request. I'm aware. It will take time to compile. I understand, but I need it as soon as possible. Brennan studied him for a long moment. You've created quite a storm, Mr. Reid. I expose corruption. Some would say you grandstand. Some would be wrong. Brennan leaned back in his chair. I've known Sabrina Clarke for 12 years. She's always been firm, but I never suspected that she was systematically discriminating against defendants based on race. Ashton finished. Brennan winced. Those are serious accusations, backed by serious evidence. Ashton pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the desk. This is a preliminary analysis compiled by my office. Sentencing disparities, conviction rates, fine amounts, all broken down by race. Brennan opened the folder. His eyes moved across the pages. The more he read, the deeper his frown became. My God, he whispered. Black defendants in Judge Clarke's courtroom received sentences an average of 43% longer than white defendants for the same crimes. Ashton said quietly. Hispanic defendants receive fines 70% higher. The patterns are undeniable. Brennan closed the folder slowly. He suddenly looked much older than 72. I should have noticed, he said. I'm the chief judge. This happened under my watch. You weren't the one discriminating. No, but I was responsible for oversight, and I failed. Ashton didn't argue with that. I'll have my staff begin compiling the records, Brennan said finally. You'll have everything within 72 hours. Thank you, Judge. As Ashton stood to leave, Brennan spoke again. Mr. Reid, be careful. Sabrina Clarke comes from a very influential family. Her father was a state senator. Her uncle is a federal judge. When you go after someone like that, they fight back, Ashton finished. I know. I'm not just talking about legal fights, Brennan said quietly. People with power play dirty. Ashton met his eyes. Then they're going to be disappointed, because I don't scare easily. Hit that like button if you're Team Ashton. Only people who support corruption wouldn't like this video. By noon, the story had taken a new turn. Gerald Whitmore held his own press conference on the courthouse steps, the same steps where Ashton had stood the day before. Whitmore was in his 60s, with silver hair and an expensive suit. He spoke with the confidence of a man who'd won hundreds of cases. My client, Judge Sabrina Clarke, is the victim of a politically motivated attack, he announced to the cameras. Attorney General Reid entered a courtroom under false pretenses, deliberately provoked a confrontation, and then used his authority to publicly humiliate a respected member of the judiciary. Reporters shouted questions. Is it true Judge Clarke tried to jail him? Whitmore smiled smoothly. Judge Clarke was maintaining order in her courtroom, something she has every right and responsibility to do. Mr. Reid was being disruptive. When she attempted to address that disruption, he ambushed her with his credentials. It was a setup plain and simple. What about the allegations of racial bias? Completely unfounded, Whitmore said firmly. Judge Clarke has served this community with distinction for 12 years. She has sentenced thousands of defendants of all races, all backgrounds. Cherry-picking a handful of cases and claiming discrimination is intellectually dishonest and legally baseless. Will she resign? Absolutely not. Judge Clarke has done nothing wrong, and she will fight these charges vigorously. We will be filing a formal complaint against Mr. Reid with the State Bar Association for ethical violations. More questions erupted, but Whitmore raised his hand. That's all for now. Thank you. He walked away, leaving the reporters scrambling. Ashton watched the press conference on his phone from inside his car. Diane sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through social media on her tablet. It's working, she said. His narrative is gaining traction. Hashtag Justice for Judge Clarke is trending on Twitter. Conservative media outlets are running with the political hit job angle. Of course they are, Ashton said. It's easier than admitting the justice system has problems. We need to respond. We will at the press conference. When? Ashton checked his watch. 2 hours. That gives Whitmore enough time to think he's winning. Diane looked at him. You're enjoying this. No, Ashton said quietly, but I'm not afraid of it either. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You made a powerful enemy. Walk away while you still can. Ashton stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. Problem? Diane asked. Just noise. But as he said it, he couldn't shake the memory of Judge Brennan's warning. People with power play dirty. The press conference was held at the State Attorney General's office in Atlanta. Ashton stood behind a drive from bearing the state seal, flanked by Diane and Marcus. The room was packed with reporters. Good afternoon, Ashton began. I want to address the accusations made by Mr. Whitmore earlier today. First, let me be clear. I did not provoke Judge Clarke. I observe her courtroom as part of an ongoing investigation into multiple complaints of judicial misconduct. I remained silent until she ordered me jailed for contempt of court, a contempt charge based solely on my presence in her courtroom. He paused, letting that sink in. Second, the allegations of racial bias are not based on a handful of cherry-picked cases, as Mr. Whitmore claimed. They are based on a comprehensive analysis of thousands of cases over 5 years. The data is overwhelming and will be made public as part of the formal investigation. A reporter raised her hand. Attorney General Reid, Do you have any comment on the ethics complaint being filed against you? I welcome it, Ashton said. I have full confidence that my actions were appropriate, legal, and necessary. If the Bar Association wants to review them, they're welcome to do so. Another reporter. Critics are saying you're trying to make a name for yourself by going after a sitting judge. What's your response? Ashton's expression hardened. My response is this. I took an oath to uphold the law and protect the citizens of Georgia. That includes protecting them from judges who abuse their power. If doing my job makes me unpopular with certain people, so be it. What happens to Judge Clarke now? She will have a full and fair hearing. She will have the opportunity to defend herself. But if the evidence shows what I believe it will show, she will be removed from the bench and held accountable. And if she's not convicted? Ashton looked directly into the camera. Then I will have done my job by exposing the truth and letting the system work as it's supposed to. But one way or another, the people of Millerton and all of Georgia will know exactly what happened in that courtroom. The press conference ended. But as Ashton walked back to his office, Marcus pulled him aside. We got a problem. Another one? Judge Clarke's family is making calls. Her uncle, the federal judge, reached out to the governor's office. He's applying pressure to drop the investigation. Ashton stopped walking. The governor won't cave. Maybe not, but political pressure is building. And if Clarke's family starts making donations, calling in favors, then we work faster, Ashton said. We build our case so solid that no amount of political pressure can stop it. But even as he said it, he felt the walls starting to close in. This wasn't just about one judge anymore. This was about power. And power never surrendered without a fight. That night, as Ashton worked late in his office, his personal cell phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello? A woman's voice. Quiet. Scared. Mr. Reid? Yes. Who is this? My name is Patricia Mills. I'm a court reporter in Millerton. I worked in Judge Clarke's courtroom for 6 years. Ashton sat up straighter. Ms. Mills, are you calling to file a complaint? No, I'm calling to warn you. Ashton's blood went cold. Warn me about what? Judge Clarke. She's not going down quietly. Her family has connections you don't even know about. And yesterday, I overheard her on the phone with someone. She said... Patricia's voice dropped to a whisper. She said she was going to bury you before you bury her. Ashton's jaw tightened. Ms. Mills, if you have information about threats or... I'm not testifying, Patricia said quickly. I can't. I have kids. But I needed you to know. Be careful, Mr. Reid. These people don't play fair. The line went dead. Ashton sat in the darkness of his office, staring at his phone. Outside, Atlanta glittered in the night. But somewhere in that city, and in Millerton and in courthouses across the state, people were watching, waiting, planning their next move. And Ashton Reid realized that exposing Judge Clarke might have been the easy part. Surviving what came next, that was going to be the real challenge. Ashton didn't sleep that night. He sat in his downtown Atlanta apartment, the city lights streaming through his windows, Patricia Mills's warning echoing in his head. She said she was going to bury you before you bury her. At 2 a.m, he was still awake, going through files. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. His eyes burned from staring at screens. That's when he found it. A name that appeared in 3 different case files from Judge Clarke's courtroom. Not as a defendant, not as a lawyer, as a witness. The same witness. In 3 completely unrelated cases. Ashton leaned closer to his laptop screen, his exhaustion forgotten. The witness's name was Martin Voss. According to the records, he'd testified in a drug case, a robbery case, and an assault case, all within a 6-month period 2 years ago. That wasn't impossible. Some people witnessed multiple crimes, but something felt wrong. Ashton pulled up the case summaries. In each one, Voss's testimony had been the deciding factor. His testimony alone had led to convictions. All 3 defendants were black. All 3 received maximum sentences from Judge Clarke. Ashton's fingers flew across his keyboard. He ran Voss's name through the state database. No criminal record. No address on file. No tax returns. No driver's license. It was like Martin Voss didn't exist. Ashton grabbed his phone and called Marcus, not caring that it was 2 a.m. Marcus answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Boss? What's wrong? I need you to run a deep background check on someone. Martin Voss. VOSS. I need everything. Where he lives, where he works, family, friends, everything. Right now? Right now." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "Okay, give me an hour. You've got 30 minutes. Ashton hung up and kept digging. He pulled up the court transcripts from Voss's testimonies, read through them word by word, and that's when he saw the pattern. The language was too similar, the phrasing too consistent. In each case, Voss described seeing the defendant from approximately 20 feet away in adequate lighting conditions. In each case, he said he got a clear look at the subject's face for several seconds. The words were almost identical, like someone had given him a script. Ashton's heart started pounding. This wasn't just bias. This was something worse. 28 minutes later, Marcus called back. "Boss, I got nothing." "What do you mean, nothing?" "I mean Martin Voss doesn't exist. No social security number. No birth certificate. No employment records. No property ownership. Nothing. It's like the name is completely fake." Ashton stood up and started pacing. "That's impossible. He testified in court. He was under oath. Someone verified his identity. Then someone lied," Marcus said, "or someone created a fake identity specifically for those testimonies." "Who would do that?" Marcus was silent. Then they both realized the answer at the same time. "Oh my God," Marcus whispered. "Judge Clarke," Ashton said. "She was using fake witnesses." If you think fake witnesses should be a federal crime, comment, "Lock her up," right now. Only criminals would defend this. By sunrise, Ashton had assembled an emergency team in his office. Marcus, Diane, and Jennifer Okafor, the head of the Attorney General's Criminal Investigations Division. A no-nonsense former FBI agent with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for corruption. "Walk me through it again," Jennifer said, leaning over the conference table covered in documents. Ashton pointed to the case files. 3 cases, 3 convictions, all based primarily on testimony from Martin Voss, a witness who doesn't exist. "I think Judge Clarke or someone working with her created a fake identity to secure convictions." "That's witness tampering," Jennifer said. "That's fraud. That's obstruction of justice. If you're right, Clarke isn't just biased. She's a criminal." "We need proof," Diane said. "Real proof, not just suspicious patterns." "The proof is in the cases," Ashton said. "We need to interview the defendants who were convicted based on Voss's testimony. We need to find out if anyone else noticed this. And we need to figure out who actually showed up in court pretending to be Martin Voss." Marcus pulled up photos on his laptop. "I've already started. The first case was State versus Darius Johnson, convicted of drug possession with intent to distribute, currently serving 5 years at Hancock State Prison. The second case?" Jennifer asked. "State versus Terrell Robinson, robbery, 7 years, also at Hancock. And the third, State versus Marcus Hayes, assault, 8 years. He's at Coastal State Prison." Ashton looked at each photo. 3 young black men, 3 lives destroyed, possibly based on fake testimony. "We visit them today," Ashton said. "All 3. I want to hear their stories directly." "That's going to raise flags," Diane warned. "The moment we start interviewing prisoners from Clarke's cases, word will get out." "Let it," Ashton said. "I'm done being quiet." Hancock State Prison was 2 hours south of Atlanta. Ashton and Jennifer made the drive in silence, both lost in thought. The prison was a sprawling complex of concrete and razor wire, surrounded by empty fields. It looked exactly like what it was, a place where hope went to die. They went through security, surrendered their phones, and were escorted to a visitor's room. Darius Johnson was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He was 26 years old, but looked older. Prison had a way of aging people. He sat down across from Ashton and Jennifer, his eyes suspicious. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Ashton Reid. I'm the Attorney General of Georgia." Darius blinked. "Why is the Attorney General visiting me?" "Because I think you might be innocent." The words hung in the air. Darius laughed bitterly. "Man, everybody in here says they're innocent." "I'm not talking about what you say," Ashton replied. "I'm talking about what the evidence shows. Or doesn't show. Tell me about your trial." Darius leaned back. "What's there to tell? Judge said I was guilty. Send me up. That's it. What about the witness?" "Martin Voss." Darius's expression changed. Just slightly. A flicker of confusion. "Yeah, that dude. Did you know him?" "Never seen him before in my life. But he testified that he saw you selling drugs." "That's what he said." "Was he lying?" Darius met Ashton's eyes. "Man, I don't know. Maybe he was mistaken. Maybe he saw somebody who looked like me. All I know is I wasn't selling nothing that night. I was at my girlfriend's house. But my public defender said her testimony wouldn't matter because she's my girl. So of course she'd lie for me. Do you remember what Voss looked like?" Darius thought for a moment. White dude, maybe 50, 60 years old. Bald. Glasses. He looked, I don't know, normal, like a regular guy. Jennifer leaned forward. "Did anything about his testimony seem strange to you?" "The whole thing seemed strange. He was real specific about everything, like he'd memorized it. My lawyer tried to poke holes in his story, but Judge Clarke shut him down every time. Said Voss was a credible witness, and that was that." Ashton and Jennifer exchanged glances. "Darius," Ashton said carefully, "what if I told you that Martin Voss might not be a real person? That the man who testified against you might have been lying about his identity?" Darius stared at him. "You serious?" "I'm trying to find out. But I need your help. I need you to think back to that trial. Anything unusual. Anything that didn't feel right." Darius was quiet for a long time. Then, Judge Clarke. She kept looking at Voss. Like they knew each other. I remember thinking it was weird. The way she smiled at him when he was leaving the stand. Like he'd done her a favor. Ashton felt ice in his veins. "Thank you, Darius. We're going to look into this further. Does this mean I might get out?" "I can't make any promises. But if what I think happened actually happened, you might get a new trial." For the first time since entering the room, Darius's expression softened. "Man," he whispered, "that's all I want. Just a fair shot." They interviewed Terrell Robinson next. His story was almost identical. Convicted based primarily on Martin Voss's testimony. A white man bald with glasses. Testimony that sounded rehearsed. And Judge Clarke treating the witness like gold. "She didn't even question him," Terrell said, shaking his head. "My lawyer tried to cross-examine him, but she kept sustaining objections. It was like she was protecting him." By the time they drove to Coastal State Prison to interview Marcus Hayes, the pattern was undeniable. Same witness description. Same testimony style. Same judge behavior. 3 fake convictions. 3 innocent men locked away. And Judge Sabrina Clarke at the center of it all. That evening, Ashton stood in his office, staring at a whiteboard covered in notes and photographs. Martin Voss's name was circled in red at the center. Lines connected to Judge Clarke. Lines connected to the 3 defendants. Lines connected to question marks, because there were still so many questions. Who was the man who pretended to be Voss? Why did he do it? Was he paid? And most importantly, how many other cases involve fake witnesses? Marcus entered with a laptop. "Boss, you need to see this." He set the laptop on Ashton's desk and pulled up court security footage from 2 years ago. "I got this from the Millerton Courthouse archives. It took some digging, but I found footage from the day Martin Voss testified in the Darius Johnson case." The video was grainy black and white, but clear enough. It showed the courthouse hallway. People walking. Lawyers chatting. Standard courthouse activity. Then a man appeared on screen. White. Late 50s, bald, glasses. He was walking with purpose toward courtroom 7B. But before he entered, he stopped, and Judge Sabrina Clarke stepped out a side door. They spoke for less than 30 seconds. Clarke handed him something, a piece of paper, maybe, or an envelope. The man nodded. Then he entered the courtroom. Clarke watched him go, then looked directly at the camera. For just a moment, her expression was cold, calculating. Then she smoothed her face into a smile and walked away. Ashton felt his hands curl into fists. "We've got her," he said quietly. "Not yet," Jennifer said from the doorway. She'd been watching over his shoulder. "That footage shows him talking, but it doesn't prove he's a fake witness. We need to identify the man, find out who he really is. Run facial recognition," Ashton ordered. "Already on it," Marcus said. They worked through the night, and at 3 a.m, the computer beeped. "Match found." Marcus pulled up the results, and everyone gathered around the screen. The man's real name was Richard Pettigrew, former police officer from Savannah. Retired 15 years ago. Current occupation, private investigator. And according to his tax records, he'd received payments from a private account belonging to Judge Sabrina Clarke's father, former state Senator Thomas Clarke. Ashton stared at the screen. Her father was paying a retired cop to testify as a fake witness in her courtroom, he said slowly. "This isn't just corruption. This is a conspiracy." "It gets worse," Jennifer said, pulling up more records. Pettigrew testified in 12 other cases over the past 4 years, always using different fake names, always in Judge Clarke's courtroom, and every single defendant was black or Latino. The room went silent. This wasn't just a racist judge. This was systematic, deliberate, organized. This was evil. Ashton stood and walked to the window. Outside, Atlanta was dark except for scattered lights. Somewhere out there, Judge Sabrina Clarke was probably sleeping peacefully in her comfortable home, thinking she'd gotten away with it. But she hadn't. Not anymore. "Marcus," Ashton said without turning around, "I want arrest warrants drawn up for Judge Sabrina Clarke, Richard Pettigrew, and Thomas Clarke. Charges include conspiracy, witness tampering, obstruction of justice fraud, and civil rights violations." "Yes, sir." "Diane, prepare a press statement. I want this announced publicly within 24 hours. "On it." "Jennifer, coordinate with the FBI. This crosses into federal jurisdiction now." "Understood." Ashton finally turned to face his team. "This is going to get uglier before it gets better," he said. "The Clarke family has power, money, connections. They're going to fight back with everything they have. Let them," Marcus said firmly. "We've got the truth," Jennifer added. "And the truth always wins," Diane finished. Ashton nodded. But in the back of his mind, Patricia Mills's warning echoed again. She's going to bury you before you bury her. The question was, who would strike first? The next morning, before Ashton could execute the arrest warrants, his phone rang. It was Gerald Whitmore. "Mr. Reid," the lawyer's smooth voice said, "I think we need to talk." "About what?" "About making this all go away." Ashton's blood ran cold. "Excuse me? My client is prepared to resign from the bench immediately. Retire quietly. In exchange, you drop the investigation. No charges. No publicity. Everyone walks away." "Your client fabricated witnesses and sent innocent people to prison," Ashton said, his voice hard as steel. "She's not walking away from anything. Think carefully, Mr. Reid. The Clarke family is very influential. If you push this, they'll destroy you. Your career, your reputation, everything. Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check." Ashton smiled, even though Whitmore couldn't see it. "Tell your client and her family that I don't negotiate with criminals. Tell them the arrest warrants will be executed within 24 hours. And tell them that if they try to run, I'll hunt them down myself." He hung up. 5 seconds later, Diane burst into his office. "Ashton, we got a problem." "What now?" "Judge Clarke just filed an emergency appeal with the state Supreme Court. She's claiming judicial immunity and asking them to block your investigation. Ashton's jaw tightened. The war had officially begun. Subscribe if you want to see justice served. Only villains would hit that unsubscribe button right now. The Georgia State Supreme Court building stood like a marble fortress in downtown Atlanta. Ashton climbed the steps at 8 a.m., briefcase in hand, Jennifer Okafor beside him. Inside, the hallways were quiet, dignified, the kind of place where whispers echoed and every footstep carried weight. Judge Sabrina Clarke's emergency appeal was being heard in front of a special three-judge panel. If they sided with her, the investigation would be frozen, the arrest warrants would be blocked, and Clarke would walk free. Ashton couldn't let that happen. They entered the courtroom. It was smaller than he expected, with dark wood paneling and high ceilings. The three Supreme Court justices sat at the bench, looking down like gods from Mount Olympus. On the other side of the room, Gerald Whitmore stood with Judge Clarke beside him. She looked different today, smaller somehow. Her confident mask had cracked, revealing something fragile underneath. But when her eyes met Ashton's, they still burned with hatred. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Justices Ramirez, Chun, and Williams presiding. Everyone stood. Justice Ramirez, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, spoke first. "We're here to consider an emergency motion filed by Judge Sabrina Clarke requesting that this court issue an immediate injunction blocking the Attorney General's investigation into her conduct. Mr. Whitmore, you may begin." Gerald Whitmore stood, smoothing his expensive suit. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case represents a dangerous precedent. The targeting of a sitting judge by a politically motivated Attorney General who seeks to make headlines rather than pursue justice. Judge Clarke has served the citizens of Millerton faithfully for 12 years. She has been given no formal charges, no opportunity to defend herself, and yet Mr. Reid has publicly condemned her, suspended her from her duties, and subjected her to a media circus that has destroyed her reputation." He paused for effect. Judges must be protected from this kind of persecution. Judicial immunity exists for a reason, to prevent lawyers, prosecutors, and even attorneys general from intimidating judges who make difficult decisions. Without that protection, our entire justice system collapses. We respectfully request that this court stop Mr. Reid's investigation immediately and restore Judge Clarke to her rightful position. Justice Chun, a younger man with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Mr. Whitmore, doesn't judicial immunity protect judges from civil liability, not criminal prosecution?" "Your Honor, there are no criminal charges filed yet. This is still an investigation phase, and an investigation that apparently uncovered evidence of fabricated witnesses," Justice Williams interrupted, flipping through papers on his bench. "I've read the preliminary brief filed by the Attorney General's office. These are serious allegations." Whitmore's jaw tightened. "Allegations, Your Honor. Not facts, not proof. Just politically motivated allegations designed to destroy a respected judge." "Mr. Reid," Justice Ramirez said, turning her attention to Ashton, "what is your response?" Ashton stood. He'd prepared a speech, practiced it, refined it, but now, standing in front of the state's highest court, with three innocent men sitting in prison cells and Judge Clarke smirking at him from across the room, he threw the speech away. "Your Honors," he began, his voice clear and strong, "6 weeks ago, I received a letter. It was from a grandmother in Millerton named Dorothy Miller. She wrote to me because her grandson, a 19-year-old kid named DeAndre, was sentenced to 60 days in jail for stealing a $3 sandwich because he was hungry." He let that sink in. 60 days. For being poor and desperate. "I read that letter, and I read dozens more like it. Stories of excessive fines, impossible sentences, a courtroom where the color of your skin determined your punishment. So I did what any attorney general should do. I investigated." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and held it up. This folder contains evidence of 12 cases where a witness named Martin Voss testified in Judge Clarke's courtroom. Martin Voss doesn't exist. He's a fake identity used by a retired police officer named Richard Pettigrew, who was paid by Judge Clarke's father to give false testimony against innocent defendants. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Judge Clarke's face went pale. Whitmore jumped his feet. Your Honors, this is outrageous. These accusations are supported by bank records, video evidence, and testimony from the convicted defendants, Ashton continued, raising his voice over Whitmore's objections. We have footage of Judge Clarke meeting with Pettigrew before he testified. We have financial records showing payments from her father's account to Pettigrew's. We have witness statements describing identical testimony in unrelated cases. Justice Ramirez's expression had hardened. Mr. Reid, are you saying that Judge Clarke knowingly allowed false testimony in her courtroom? I'm saying she orchestrated it, Your Honor. She and her father conspired to fabricate witnesses to secure convictions against innocent people. 3 men are currently in prison based on that false testimony. 3 innocent men whose lives were destroyed by a judge who was supposed to protect justice, not pervert it. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Clarke grabbed Whitmore's arm, whispering urgently. Justice Chun held up his hand for silence. Mr. Whitmore, he said coldly, do you have a response to these allegations? Whitmore stood slowly. For the first time since Ashton had known him, the legendary defense attorney looked rattled. Your Honors, these allegations are shocking, and I will need time to review this evidence with my client. But I maintain that judicial immunity does not protect criminal conduct. Justice Williams finished. If these allegations are true, Judge Clarke is not being persecuted. She's being prosecuted. There's a difference. Justice Ramirez looked at Ashton. Mr. Reid, do you have arrest warrants prepared? Yes, Your Honor. For Judge Clarke, Richard Pettigrew, and former state senator Thomas Clarke. And you're prepared to file formal charges? Within the hour, the 3 justices looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Justice Ramirez spoke. The emergency motion is denied. Judge Clarke's suspension remains in effect. This court will not interfere with the Attorney General's investigation. However, Mr. Reid, you are reminded that these are serious charges requiring serious evidence. We expect you to proceed with the utmost care and professionalism. Understood, Your Honor. This hearing is adjourned. Bang. The gavel fell, and Judge Sabrina Clarke's world ended. If you believe justice just won, drop a guilty in the comments. Only corrupt people defend her now. The arrests happen fast. Within 2 hours, Richard Pettigrew was taken into custody at his home in Savannah. He didn't resist, didn't say a word, just put his hands behind his back and let the FBI agents cuff him. Thomas Clarke, the former state senator, was arrested at his country club. According to reports, he'd been playing golf when federal agents approached him on the 7-hole. His lawyer was screaming about harassment before the cuffs were even on. But Judge Sabrina Clarke, she was different. When the FBI arrived at her house in Millerton, she was standing in her driveway, still wearing her suit from the Supreme Court hearing, waiting, like she'd known this moment was coming. Agent Rivera approached her slowly. Judge Clarke, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. Clarke looked past her, to where news cameras had already gathered on the street. You're ruining my life, she said quietly. No, ma'am, Rivera replied. You ruined your own life, and you ruined a lot of other lives, too. Clarke turned her wrists without being asked. The handcuffs clicked closed, and for the first time in 12 years, Judge Sabrina Clarke was no longer the one in control. The booking photos hit the news within an hour. 3 faces, 3 mugshots. Judge Sabrina Clarke, staring at the camera with dead eyes. Richard Pettigrew, looking at the floor. Thomas Clarke, red-faced and furious. The headlines were everywhere. Georgia judge arrested for fabricating witnesses. Shocking conspiracy uncovered in small-town courtroom. 3 innocent men may be freed after false testimony exposed. Ashton watched the coverage from his office, exhausted but relieved. Diane entered with coffee. The governor just called. He wants to personally thank you. Tell him I was just doing my job. The FBI also called. They want to know if you think there are more cases like this in other courtrooms. Ashton rubbed his temples. Probably. We'll need to expand investigation. That could take years. Then it takes years. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Boss, you need to see this." He held up his phone. A news broadcast was playing. On screen, DeAndre Miller, the young man who'd been sentenced to 60 days for stealing a sandwich, stood with his grandmother outside the courthouse. "I just want to say thank you," DeAndre said to the cameras, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you to Attorney General Reid for believing in people like me, for seeing us as human beings, for fighting for justice when nobody else would." His grandmother squeezed his hand. "God bless that man. God bless him." The video ended. Ashton felt something tight in his chest loosen. This was why he did it. Not for the headlines. Not for the glory. For moments like this. For people like DeAndre and his grandmother. For justice. 3 days later, the preliminary hearing was held. Gerald Whitmore had withdrawn as Clarke's attorney. Apparently even he had limits. She was now represented by a young public defender who looked terrified. The evidence was presented methodically. Bank records, video footage, testimony transcripts, witness statements. By the end of the day, the judge presiding over the hearing, an elderly man who'd served on the bench for 40 years, looked physically ill. "In my 4 decades as a judge," he said slowly, "I have never seen such a betrayal of public trust. The charges against Judge Clarke, Mr. Pettigrew, and Mr. Thomas Clarke will proceed to trial. Bail is denied for all 3 defendants due to flight risk and the severity of crimes." Clarke closed her eyes. Her father started shouting, but bailiffs quickly escorted him out. Richard Pettigrew just sat there, staring at his hands. As they were led away in handcuffs, Ashton stood in the back of the courtroom, watching. It wasn't over yet. The trial would take months. The defense would fight hard. Appeals would drag on for years. But the truth was out now, and the truth couldn't be buried. 2 weeks later, Ashton stood outside Hancock State Prison again. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't there to interview prisoners. He was there to witness their release. Darius Johnson walked out first, blinking in the sunlight like he'd forgotten what it looked like. His mother was waiting, sobbing, running to embrace him. Then Terrell Robinson, who fell to his knees and kissed the ground. Finally, Marcus Hayes, who just stood there for a long moment, breathing free air before his family rushed forward to surround him. All 3 convictions had been overturned. All 3 men were free, and all 3 planned to sue the state for wrongful imprisonment, lawsuits that Ashton's office wouldn't fight, because they deserved compensation. They deserved acknowledgement. They deserved justice. Ashton watched from a distance, not wanting to intrude on their private moments. But Darius noticed him. He broke away from his mother and walked over. "Mr. Reid," he said, "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me," Ashton replied. "I just did what should have been done from the beginning. Most people wouldn't have cared. Then most people are wrong." Darius smiled, a real smile, full of hope and future possibilities. "What are you going to do now?" Ashton looked back at the prison, then at the 3 freed men reuniting with their families. "Keep going," he said, "because if this happened here, it's happening somewhere else, and somebody needs to stop it." 6 months later, the trial concluded. Judge Sabrina Clarke was found guilty on all counts, sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Richard Pettigrew pleaded guilty and received 10 years in exchange for his testimony against the Clarkes. Thomas Clarke, the former state senator, was convicted of conspiracy and sentenced to 12 years. The Clarke family's reputation, built over generations, was destroyed in a matter of months. Their assets were seized to pay restitution to their victims. Their name became synonymous with corruption, and the small town of Millerton, Georgia, began the slow process of healing. A year after it all began, Ashton stood on the steps of the Millerton courthouse again. They were dedicating a plaque today, a memorial to the victims of judicial corruption, a reminder that justice must be protected, not assumed. Dorothy Miller, DeAndre's grandmother, was there along with the 3 freed men and their families. The mayor of Millerton spoke. The new judge assigned to courtroom 7B spoke. Community leaders spoke. Then they asked Ashton to say a few words. He stepped up to the microphone, looking out at the crowd of hundreds who had gathered. "A year ago," he began, "I came to this courthouse because I received letters. Letters from people who felt invisible. People who thought nobody cared about their stories. People who had lost faith that justice still existed." He paused. "I want those people to know something. You were never invisible. Your stories mattered. And justice, real justice, is worth fighting for. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary." He looked at the plaque behind him, then back at the crowd. "What happened here should never have happened. But it did. And now we have a choice. We can pretend it was an isolated incident, or we can use it as a reminder that power without accountability leads to tyranny, that silence in the face of injustice is complicity, and that ordinary people, like Dorothy Miller, like DeAndre, like Darius, Terrell, and Marcus, have the power to change the world by refusing to stay silent." The crowd erupted in applause. Dorothy Miller wiped tears from her eyes. DeAndre, now enrolled in community college and working toward a better future, smiled. And Ashton felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe, just maybe, the system could work. If people fought for it. If people demanded it. If people refused to accept anything less. That evening, Ashton sat in his Atlanta apartment, looking out at the city lights. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Another complaint came in. Judge in Columbus. Similar pattern. Might be worth looking into. Ashton stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed back, "Send me everything you have. I'll drive down tomorrow." Because the work wasn't finished. It never really was. There would always be another corrupt official. Another person abusing their power. Another victim who needed someone to believe them. But that was okay. Because there would also always be people like Ashton Reid. People who believed that justice wasn't just a word. IT was a promise, a commitment, not a responsibility. And some promises were worth fighting for. And no matter how long it took, and no matter how hard the battle, and no matter what it cost, Ashton stood, grabbed his briefcase, and started preparing for tomorrow. Because somewhere in Columbus, Georgia, another Dorothy Miller was probably sitting in her living room, wondering if anyone would ever listen to her story. And Ashton was going to make damn sure someone did.